The wind screamed through Lancaster, Pennsylvania, a bone-deep howl that clawed at the Thompson house's warped window frames. Inside, Linda Thompson, 63, curled into a tight ball beneath 3 Amish quilts, her teeth chattering despite the layers, her forehead burned slick with sweat, and her throat felt like she'd swallowed a fistful of broken glass. The fever had pinned her to the bed since dawn, each breath a ragged effort, but it wasn't the cold or the sickness that made her chest ache. It was the voices slicing through the bedroom door. "Mom, are you still in there?" Matt's voice, sharp and impatient, cut like a blade. "We're starving out here. What are we supposed to do, order pizza again?" Linda forced her eyes open, the room tilting as she propped herself on one elbow. Her arms trembled, weak as wet paper. "There's stew in the fridge," she rasped, each word scraping her throat raw. "From yesterday. Just heat it." Before she could finish, a second voice, Jess's, cold and venomous, exploded from the hallway. "A stew? Are you kidding me, Linda? 8 years I've been in this family and you've never once let a meal go cold? Now you catch some little cold and just give up?" Her slippers slapped the hardwood, each step a gunshot. "I'm done. I'm going to my mom's. At least I can eat in peace there." The front door slammed, rattling the windows so hard Linda flinched. The quilt slipped, exposing her to the draft snaking through the room. She sank back, her limbs ice cold, her chest burning like a hot knife had been pressed between her ribs. One day. She hadn't cooked, and Jess had walked out in a rage. Matt's shadow loomed in the doorway, his face dark, eyes glinting with blame. "Why do you have to go and piss her off, Mom?" he muttered, his voice low and bitter. Without another word, he turned, his footsteps fading into the kitchen's chaos of unwashed pots. Linda's throat locked, shame and rage tangling like barbed wire. For 8 years, she'd been the backbone of this house, a house she had bought. Her life savings, every penny scraped from decades at the furniture plant, had gone to Matt and Jess's wedding, their down payment, their gleaming kitchen remodel. She'd washed their socks by hand, for God's sake, and when Ethan was born, she'd rocked him through colicky nights so they could sleep. But now, because her body had betrayed her for a single day, she was the villain, a burden, a failure. The wind howled again, and Linda's gaze drifted to the nightstand. Tucked beneath a glass of untouched water was a small leather notebook, its edges worn from years of hiding. She reached for it, her fingers trembling, and flipped it open. A grocery receipt from last week, $87, 23 cents for chicken, potatoes, and Ethan's favorite cereal, stared back at her. She'd started keeping track a month ago, after Jess had tossed a pile of laundry at her feet with a casual, "You're better at this, Linda." The notebook was her secret rebellion, a tally of every dollar, every favor, every drop of herself she'd poured into this ungrateful house. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock. Ethan, her 6-year-old grandson, peeked through the door, his brown eyes wide with worry. "Grandma, are you okay? Mommy was yelling." His voice was small, a lifeline in the storm. Linda forced a smile, her heart softening. "I'm just a little sick, sweetheart. I'll be fine." She patted the bed, and Ethan climbed up, curling against her side. His warmth was the only thing keeping the cold at bay. "Did Mommy leave because you're sick?" he asked, his fingers twisting the quilt's edge. "No, Ethan," Linda said, her voice steady despite the ache. "Mummy's just upset. Grown-ups get like that sometimes." Ethan nodded, but his frown lingered. "You always make my oatmeal. Who's going to do it tomorrow?" The question hit like a punch. Even Ethan, sweet as he was, saw her as the one who did things. Cooked, cleaned, fixed. Linda's smile faltered, but she smoothed his hair. "We'll figure it out, okay? Now go find your dad. He's in the kitchen." As Ethan scampered off, Linda's gaze returned to the notebook. She grabbed a pen from the nightstand and scribbled, February 3, 2025. Jess left for her mom's. No dinner served. $0, 0 cents spent. The act felt defiant, a tiny spark in the dark. She wasn't sure why she was documenting yet, but it was hers. Proof of her labor, her existence. The Thompson house stood on the edge of Lancaster's industrial district, a two-story relic of the town's furniture-making heyday. The furniture plant, where Linda and her late husband, Tom, had worked for 30 years, was a hulking shadow visible from the backyard, its smokestacks silent since the layoffs a decade ago. Tom had died 3 years after the plant downsized, leaving Linda to hold the family together. She'd done it gladly, pouring her pension and savings into Matt's future. When he brought Jess home and announced their engagement, Linda had emptied her accounts. $134,000, 0 cents. For the house, $20, 0 cents. For the kitchen, Jess insisted on. It's what moms do, she'd told herself, ignoring the hollow ache in her chest. But the gratitude she'd expected never came. Jess, with her sharp tongue and sharper expectations, treated Linda like a live-in maid. Matt, once her sweet boy, had grown distant, his silence a tacit approval of Jess's demands. Linda had become invisible, her days a blur of cooking, scrubbing, and chasing Ethan's cries. When Ethan was a baby, she'd stayed up nights making broth when Jess was too tired. When he was 3, she'd rushed him to the ER for a fever, sitting alone in the fluorescent glare while Matt and Jess slept. She'd never complained, not once. Now, as the fever burned through her, those memories felt like weights. She closed the notebook and tucked it under her pillow, her mind drifting to a locked box in the closet. Inside were sketches, stage sets she'd drawn decades ago for the Lancaster Community Center's theater group. Back then, she'd hauled lumber, hammered frames, and painted backdrops for local plays, her hands steady and sure. The theater had been her joy, a world where she was more than a worker or a mom. But when Matt got married, she'd packed it away, trading her tools for an apron. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, startling her. The screen glowed with a name she hadn't seen in years. Patricia Klein. Linda's heart skipped. Patricia, her old partner from the plant and theater days, had always been a spark of mischief, the one who'd convinced Linda to join the set crew in the ADS. The message was short but cryptic. Linda, we're reviving the community theater for a spring show. Need someone who knows a hammer from a paintbrush. You in? Call me. Linda stared at the words, her pulse quickening. The theater, a place where she'd once been seen. Her fingers hovered over the reply button, but a crash from the kitchen snapped her back. Damn it, Mom, Matt's voice boomed. This stew's cold and the pot's a mess. Can't you at least clean up? The spark in Linda's chest flared into something hotter. She swung her legs over the bed, ignoring the dizziness, and shuffled to the door. The hallway was dim, the air thick with the smell of burnt coffee. In the kitchen, Matt stood over a cluttered counter, a greasy pot in his hand. Ethan sat at the table, coloring, oblivious to the tension. Matt, Linda said, her voice hoarse but firm. If you don't like the stew, make something else. I'm sick. Matt's jaw tightened. You're always sick lately, Mom. Jess is right. You're checking out on us. What's next? You gonna stop watching Ethan too? The words stung, but Linda held his gaze. I've watched Ethan since he was born. I've cooked every meal, washed every dish. Maybe it's time you and Jess stepped up. Matt laughed, a harsh, disbelieving sound. Stepped up? We work, Mom. Jess is slammed at the office, and I'm pulling overtime. You're home all day. What else are you doing? Linda's nails dug into her palms. She wanted to scream, to list every sacrifice, the house, the money, the years of her life. But instead, she turned to the sink, grabbed a sponge, and started scrubbing the pot. The motion was automatic, her hands moving through muscle memory. Matt muttered something and stormed out, leaving Ethan's crayons scattered across the table. As the water ran, Linda's eyes fell on a pile of mail by the fridge. A credit card statement, addressed to her and Matt, peeked out. She'd added him as a secondary user years ago, a just in case for emergencies. But last month, he'd used it for Ethan's new game console. $299.99, no discussion. Her jaw clenched. She dried her hands, grabbed the statement, and slipped it into her notebook, another entry for the tally. That night, the house was quiet, the kind of silence that hums with resentment. Jess hadn't returned, and Matt was upstairs, his TV blaring. Linda sat on her bed, the notebook open, pen in hand. She added, "Credit card charge, $299.99. Matt, February 1, 2025. Then, on impulse, she pulled out her phone and dialed the bank's automated line. Her voice barely shook as she requested to cancel Matt's secondary card. "Reason for cancellation?" the system prompted. Linda paused, then said, "No longer needed." When the call ended, she felt lighter, as if a chain had snapped. She opened Patricia's message again, her thumb tracing the words, "You in?" The theater wasn't just a job, it was a door, a way out. She typed a reply, "Tell me more." Before she could second guess, she hit send. The wind howled outside, but for the first time all day, Linda didn't feel the cold. She tucked the notebook under her pillow and lay back, her mind racing. The house, the bills, the endless demands. They weren't her prison anymore. She'd built this life for Matt and Jess, but she could build something else, something hers. Downstairs, the kitchen faucet dripped, a steady, mocking rhythm. Linda closed her eyes, imagining a stage at wooden frames, painted flats, lights she'd rigged herself, and in the center, not a maid or a martyr, but Linda Thompson, hammer in hand, ready to tear it all down and start again. The kitchen clock in the Thompson house ticked like a heartbeat, each second tightening the air as Linda Thompson stood at the sink, her hands raw from scrubbing a greasy pot. The fever still burned in her bones, a dull ache that made her vision blur, but it was the slam of the front door that snapped her upright. Jess was back, her footsteps pounding the hard wood like a war drum. The Lancaster wind howled outside, rattling the windows, but it was Jess's voice that cut through the cold. "You're up," Jess said, storming into the kitchen, her coat dripping snow onto the linoleum. Her eyes swept the cluttered counter. Unwashed dishes, a half-eaten loaf of bread, Ethan's crayon stubs scattered like shrapnel. "What is this, Linda? 8 years in this place has never looked like a dump? You're too sick to clean now? Or just too lazy?" Linda's grip tightened on the sponge, her pulse hammering. The fever made her head swim, but Jess's words were a match to dry tinder. "I'm sick, Jess," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "I haven't slept. I can't do everything today." Jess laughed, a sharp, venomous sound that echoed off the Amish quilts hanging on the walls. "Oh, please. You're 63, not on your deathbed. Matt's pulling overtime at the warehouse, and I'm drowning in spreadsheets. You're home all day. What's your excuse?" Her eyes flicked to a small leather notebook tucked beneath a stack of grocery receipts on the counter. "And what's that? You keeping secrets now?" Linda's heart lurched. The notebook, her ledger, a meticulous record of every dollar spent, every favor given, was her shield, her rebellion. She slid it behind a cutting board, her hands trembling. "Just bills," she lied, but her voice cracked, betraying. Jess stepped closer, her eyes narrowing like a predator's. "Bills, huh? Funny, because Matt said you canceled his credit card. No warning, no nothing. What are you playing at, Linda? Trying to screw us over?" The air crackled, thick with unspoken accusations. Before Linda could respond, Matt's heavy footsteps thumped down the stairs. "What's going on?" he demanded, his face stormy as he entered the kitchen, his work boots leaving muddy streaks. Ethan trailed behind, clutching a piece of paper, his brown eyes wide with worry. "Your mom's checking out on us," Jess snapped, crossing her arms. "No dinner, no cleaning, and now she's hiding something. Look at this place, it's a disaster." Matt's gaze swept the kitchen, then landed on Linda, hard and unyielding. "Mom, what's with the card? I tried to buy Ethan's school supplies today and it got declined. You can't just pull stuff like that without telling me." Linda's chest tightened, shame and rage colliding like a storm. For 8 years she'd been their backbone. $134,000 0 cents for this house, $20 0 cents for their wedding, $15 0 cents for the gleaming kitchen Jess bragged about at her book club. She'd washed their socks, cooked their meals, rocked Ethan through colicky nights, and now, because she dared to draw one line, she was the enemy. Her eyes darted to the ledger, its worn cover a silent witness to her labor. "I canceled it because it's my card," Linda said, her voice steady despite the fever's haze. "You used it for Ethan's game console last month, Matt. $299.99. No discussion. I'm done footing your bills." Matt's jaw dropped, his face flushing. Jess stepped forward, her voice dripping with scorn. "Done? You don't get to be done, Linda. We're a family. You live here rent-free, eat our food, and now you're throwing a tantrum because we expect you to pull your weight? Who do you think you are?" The words were gasoline, and Linda's restraint burned away. Her hands shook as she gripped the pot, the water inside simmering, steam curling like a warning. "Pull my weight?" she said, her voice rising, a tremor of something dangerous beneath it. "I bought this house. I paid for your wedding, your kitchen, your life. I've washed your clothes, cooked your meals, raised your son. I'm not your maid, Jess." The room went silent, the only sound the pot's faint hiss. Jess's eyes widened, her mouth opening, but before she could retort, Linda's grip slipped. The pot crashed into the sink, boiling water splashing across the counter, a few drops grazing Jess's arm. She yelped, jumping back, her dress stained. "Did you do that on purpose?" she shrieked, her voice shrill, her hand clutching her arm as if scalded. Matt stepped between them, his face pale. "Mom, what the hell? What's gotten into you?" Linda stood frozen, the sponge still in her hand, her breath ragged. The crash echoed in her ears, a symbol of something shattering inside her. "What's gotten into me?" she said, her voice low, dangerous. "I've given you everything, and you treat me like a servant. I'm done washing your pots." Ethan's small voice broke the tension, trembling like a leaf in the wind. "Grandma?" He stepped forward, holding out the paper. A crayon drawing of a stage, a gray-haired woman in the center, hammer in hand, standing tall under bright lights. "I made this for you. It's you at the theater, like you told me about." The drawing hit Linda like a wave, her eyes stinging as she took it, her fingers tracing the shaky lines. Ethan saw her not as a maid, not as a burden, but as a builder, a creator. She knelt, pulling him into a hug, her voice cracking. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Thank you." Jess scoffed, but her voice faltered, a crack in her armor. "Theater? What's this nonsense? You're not seriously thinking of running off to play with props, are you? At your age?" Linda stood, the drawing clutched to her chest, her eyes locking with Jess's. "Maybe I am," she said, her voice steady, a quiet fire burning. "Maybe I'm done playing your game." Matt's brow furrowed, his hands clenching. "Mom, you're not making sense. You're sick, you're tired, let's just calm down and talk this out." "There's nothing to talk out," Linda said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. She turned back to the sink, her hands moving automatically to rinse the sponge, but her mind was elsewhere. The ledger, the drawing, Patricia's message. They were pieces of a puzzle she was only beginning to understand. She wasn't just fighting for respect, she was fighting for herself. That night, when the house fell into an uneasy silence, Linda sat on her bed, the ledger open before her. The fever had dulled to a low hum, but her resolve burned brighter. She added a new entry. February 4, 2025. Kitchen confrontation. Jess accused me of scheming. $0, 0 cents spent. Beneath it, she scrawled a cryptic note. Call lawyer Reed, deed 2/10. The words felt dangerous. A promise to herself. The house, paid for with her life savings, was hers in ways Matt and Jess could never understand. She tucked the ledger into a locked drawer, her fingers lingering on the key. Her phone buzzed, the screen glowing with Patricia's name. The message was brief but urgent. "Linda, theater meeting tomorrow, 7 p.m. We need you. Big production. tight deadline. Don't back out now. Linda's pulse quickened. The theater wasn't just a job. It was a door, one she'd kept locked for too long. She typed a reply, "I'll be there." Before she could second guess, she hit send. The wind howled outside, snow piling against the windows, but Linda's mind was racing. She needed to move, to act. The suitcase in her closet, an old leather relic from her husband, Tom, held more than memories. It held her freedom. Bank statements, mortgage receipts, a faded theater sketch from 1985. She pulled it down, her hands steady despite the fever, and began packing. The ledger, Ethan's drawing, a photo of her and Tom on a stage, their faces young and alive. These were her anchors, her proof. Under the cover of night, Linda slipped out, the snow crunching under her boots as she trudged to the Lancaster Community Center. The theater was a squat brick building, its faded banner proclaiming "Spring Revival, Build Together." The prop room was dusty, cluttered with wooden flats and tangled ropes, but it felt like home. She hid the suitcase behind a painted backdrop, her breath catching as a floorboard creaked behind her. She froze, heart pounding, but no one was there. Just the wind, she told herself, but the unease lingered. Back home, Linda made another call, her voice low as she spoke to her bank. "I need to reactivate an old savings account," she said, reading off the number, "and update my insurance. Remove Matthew Thompson as emergency contact." The representative's voice was calm, professional, but to Linda each word was a brick in a new wall. The account, $20,000, 0 cents, scraped together during her hardest years, was hers again. No joint access, no secondary cards. Hers. The snow fell softly outside Linda Thompson's new apartment in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, dusting the narrow balcony where she sat, a mug of rose tea warming her hands. The apartment was small, a one-bedroom with creaky floors and a view of the shuttered furniture plant, but it was hers. No unwashed pots, no demanding voices, just the quiet hum of her own life. 2 weeks had passed since the kitchen confrontation that shattered her old role as the Thompson family's invisible back. The memory of the crashed pot, Jess's shriek, and Ethan's crayon drawing still lingered, but Linda felt lighter, as if she'd shed a skin that never fit. Her phone buzzed on the wicker table, Jess's name flashing like a warning. The text was sharp, manipulative. "Linda, you can't just walk out. Matt's a mess, Ethan's asking for you, and the house is falling apart. Come back and fix this." Linda's jaw tightened. Jess hadn't apologized for her venomous words, calling Linda lazy, accusing her of scheming. Matt, silent as ever, hadn't reached out. Linda set the phone down, her eyes drifting to the leather ledger beside it. The notebook, her secret tally of 8 years' labor, groceries, favors, 1/3, $34,000, 0 cents in house payments, was more than a record. It was her power. Flipping it open, Linda paused at a cryptic note scrawled after the confrontation. "Call lawyer re. deed 2/10. Tomorrow was February 10, 2025. The note, written in a feverish haze, had been a spark of instinct. The house, bought with her life savings, wasn't just a gift. It was leverage. She'd spent years signing checks, wiring transfers, and covering mortgages, while Jess and Matt built their lives on her sacrifice. Now it was time to reclaim what was hers. Linda sipped her tea, a plan forming like a stage set taking shape under her hands. The Lancaster Community Center buzzed with anticipation, its modest theater packed for the spring show premiere. Linda stood backstage, her navy work shirt dusted with sawdust, her hands steady as she adjusted a wooden flat she'd built. The set, a quaint village square lit by warm amber lights, was her creation, every beam and brushstroke a testament to her 30 years of expertise. The audience's murmurs filtered through the curtain, a reminder of the world she'd once abandoned for family. Patricia Klein, her old friend from the furniture plant, clapped her on the shoulder. "You outdid yourself, Linda. This set's stealing the show." Her grin faltered, her voice lowering. "That tight deadline I mentioned, it wasn't just for this play. The county's funding a full season, paid positions. We want you as lead set designer, permanent. You in?" Linda's heart skipped, the offer a lifeline she hadn't dared hope for. "Permanent?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Patricia nodded. "You're the best we've got, but it's a now or never deal. Budget votes next week. Say yes, and you're set." Linda's eyes drifted to a prop in the corner. A miniature house, its tiny windows glowing like her old home. She'd designed it subconsciously, a mirror of the life she was leaving behind. "I'm in," she said, her voice firm. The curtain rose, and the audience's applause washed over her, a warmth she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. She was Linda Thompson, builder, creator. The lawyer's office on Prince Street smelled of polished wood and old coffee, its walls lined with faded Lancaster maps. Linda sat across from Jess and Matt, her ledger and a thick folder of documents on the table. The confrontation 2 weeks ago had been a spark. This was the fire. Jess's arms were crossed, her face a mask of defiance, while Matt shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Linda's gaze. Ethan wasn't here. Linda had insisted he stay with a sitter, sparing him the tension. The lawyer, a gray-haired woman named Ms. Carver, adjusted her glasses. "Ms. Thompson has requested this meeting to discuss the property at 214 Elm Street. She's provided documentation of her financial contributions." Jess scoffed, her voice dripping scorn. "This is ridiculous. Linda lives in our house rent-free. Now she's acting like we owe her?" Linda's pulse was steady, her hands calm as she opened the folder. "Not acting, Jess, proving." She slid a stack of papers across the table. Bank statements, wire transfers, mortgage receipts, each time-stamped and annotated. "This is the $134,000.00 I paid for the down payment in 2017. Here's the $15.00 for the kitchen remodel in 2019. And this," she tapped a final page, "is the mortgage. I covered for your first year $24.00. My name's not on the deed, but my money built this house." Matt's face paled, his fingers gripping the table. Jess's eyes darted to the documents, her defiance cracking. You kept all this?" she stammered. "Every penny," Linda said, her voice even, unyielding. "I'm not asking for the house back. I'm asking for what's fair. I've retained a 60% equity stake based on my contributions. You can repay me $173,000.00, or I'll file for co-ownership. Your choice." The room went silent, the lawyer's pen scratching the only sound. Jess's face twisted, her voice rising. "You're blackmailing us. You gave us that money. It was a gift." "A gift doesn't come with a lifetime of servitude," Linda said, her eyes locking with Jess's. "I cooked your meals, washed your clothes, raised Ethan. I paid your bills while you called me lazy. That ends now. You cover the mortgage, utilities, Ethan's programs. I'm done." Matt finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Mom, we didn't know it was this much. Why didn't you say anything?" Linda's gaze softened, but her resolve held. "I shouldn't have had to, Matt. You saw me breaking and you looked away. I'm not breaking anymore." Carver cleared her throat. "I've drafted an agreement, transferring financial responsibilities to Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, acknowledging Ms. Thompson's equity. Sign today, or we proceed to court." Jess's hands shook, her eyes blazing, but she grabbed the pen and scrawled her name. Matt followed, his shoulders slumped. Linda signed last, her signature steady, a final act of reclaiming her worth. As they left, Jess muttered, "You'll regret this." But Linda didn't flinch. She'd already won. Back in her apartment, Linda stood at the kitchen counter, the snow falling outside like a quiet blessing. The ledger lay open, its final page blank. She didn't need to track anymore. What needed giving, she'd given. What was worth keeping, she'd kept. Ethan's drawing, the stage sketch from Chapter 2, was pinned to the fridge, its crayon lines a reminder of who she was. A builder, not a maid. The doorbell rang, and Ethan bounded in, his backpack swinging. "Grandma, he cried, hugging her legs. Matt stood in the doorway, his face weary but softer. I brought him for a visit, he said. Jess is processing. Linda nodded, kneeling to Ethan's level. He pulled out a new drawing. A gray-haired woman in a spotlight, a hammer in one hand, a crown on her head. It's you, Grandma, he beamed. You're a stage hero now. Her throat tightened, tears prickling. You make me feel like one, sweetheart. She hugged him, his warmth anchoring her. Matt lingered, rubbing his neck. Mom, I get it now. We leaned on you too hard. I didn't see how much you gave until those papers. I'm sorry. Linda stood, meeting his eyes. It's not about sorry, Matt. It's about doing better. For Ethan, for yourself. I'll always be his grandma, but I'm not your crutch anymore. He nodded, a small pained smile breaking through. You look happier. Lighter, maybe? I am, Linda said, her voice steady. She glanced at the snowy skyline, the theater's distant lights glowing. I built a stage, Matt. This time, it's for me. As they left, Linda sank onto her couch, the apartment quiet except for the soft hum of her heater. She picked up a theater script from the table, her new role as lead set designer waiting. The ledger, the documents, the confrontation. They were her hammer and nails, crafting a life where she was the star, not the shadow. Outside, Lancaster slept under a blanket of snow. But inside, Lancaster was wide awake, her story just beginning.